some voices shouldn't be followed. Welcome to the night shift. I've lived in this part of rural Himachal my whole life. People talk a lot about the mountains being alive, but when you grow up here, you just treat those stories like background noise. It's mostly stuff to keep tourists on the marked trails or to make kids come home before the sun dips behind the peaks. But there's one specific local legend in my village, the Chalava. It's not a ghost, exactly. The old people say it's a shifter, something that mimics sounds or people to lead you off a cliff or into the deep brush. I never believed it. I'm a trekking guide. I know these woods better than I know my own backyard, or at least I thought I did. This happened last October. The air was getting that sharp, metallic bite to it, and the days were shrinking fast. I was coming back from a solo scouting trip near the old cedar grove, about 4 miles from the main road. I'd stayed out too late checking a new trail marker, and by the time I packed my gear, the forest was already turning that deep, bruised purple color it gets right before total dark. I wasn't worried. I had a solid headlamp and a power bank. About 20 minutes into the walk back, the forest went dead silent. And I mean dead. No crickets, no wind through the needles, no rustling of small animals. It was like someone had hit a mute button on the world. I slowed my pace, my boots crunching on the dry needles, sounding unnaturally loud. That's when I heard it. "Hey, wait up!" The voice came from the dense trees to my left. It sounded exactly like my cousin Rohan. We'd been hiking together since we were kids, and he has this specific high-pitched crack in his voice when he's out of breath. I stopped and swung my light toward the trees. The beam cut through the dark, hitting the gray trunks, but there was nothing there, just shadows. "Rohan?" I called out. I was confused because Rohan was supposed to be in Chandigarh for work. Maybe he'd come home early to surprise the family? "Over here." "I think I twisted my ankle," the voice said. It sounded closer now, maybe 30 yards into the thicket. I started walking toward the sound. My heart was thumping, not out of fear yet, just adrenaline. "Stay put, man! I'm coming!" I shouted. But as I pushed through some thorny bushes, a cold shiver ran down my spine. I realized something was off. The voice was coming from an area where there was no trail, just a steep, rocky drop-off that led into a ravine. "Rohan, why are you way down there?" I asked, stopping in my tracks. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. Then the voice replied, but it sounded slightly wrong. "I'm just down here. I can see your light. Come down." The phrasing was stiff. Rohan doesn't talk like that. And then it hit me. The voice didn't have any directionality to it. Usually, when someone shouts from a ravine, you hear the echo, the way the sound bounces off the rocks. This sounded like it was being whispered directly into my ear, even though the person was supposedly 30 yards away. I took a step back, my light shaking. I decided to test it. "Hey, did you bring the keys to the blue Jeep? I don't own a blue Jeep. I have a silver bike." "Yeah," the voice responded instantly. "The keys to the blue Jeep. I have them. Just come down and help me." I didn't wait. I turned and started power walking back toward the main trail. My breathing was ragged, and I could feel the sweat cooling on the back of my neck. I kept my headlamp focused straight ahead, but I could hear something moving parallel to me in the woods. It wasn't the sound of a person walking. It sounded like something heavy being dragged through the leaves, punctuated by the occasional snap of a thick branch. "Where are you going?" the voice asked. It wasn't Rohan anymore. Now it sounded like my mother. Same tone, same worried inflection. "It's dark, Beta. Come back. You're going the wrong way." I started to run. My lungs were burning from the thin, cold air. Every time I glanced to the side, I saw a flicker of something white moving between the trees. It wasn't a figure, just a shape, like a long, pale limb or a piece of cloth catching the light. The worst part was the rhythm. Whatever was out there was matching my pace perfectly. If I sped up, the dragging sound sped up. If I stumbled, it stopped and waited. I finally reached the edge of the cedar grove where the path widens out near an old, abandoned stone hut used by shepherds. I figured if I could get inside and bolt the door, I'd wait for sunrise. I dived through the doorway, my light sweeping the dusty floor. The hut was empty, smelling of damp earth and old wool. I slammed the heavy wooden door shut and shoved a rusted iron bar across it. I sat there in the dark, my back against the stones, clutching my trekking pole like a weapon. Outside, the silence returned. 10 minutes passed, 20. I started to tell myself I was just dehydrated, that the Chalava stories had finally gotten to my head. Then, there was a soft tap on the door. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't a knock. It sounded like someone was using a fingernail to scratch at the wood. "Open the door," a voice said. This time, it was my voice. Not a voice that sounded like me. It was a perfect carbon copy recording of my own voice from 5 minutes ago. "Rohan, stay put, man. I'm coming," the voice outside said, repeating the exact words I'd shouted earlier. It even had the same desperate, breathless quality. I froze. I couldn't even breathe. The scratching stopped, and I heard something climb onto the roof. The hut was old, the slate tiles clicking and shifting under a heavy weight. I looked up. There was a small gap in the roofing where a tile had slipped, maybe 2 inches wide. A pale, elongated eye peered through the gap. It didn't look human. It was too large, the pupil a vertical slit, and it was surrounded by skin that looked like wet parchment. It wasn't looking at the room, it was looking directly at me, tracking my movement in the dark. I didn't move, I didn't scream. I just stared back, paralyzed. The thing on the roof started to make a sound, a low, rhythmic clicking, like a tongue hitting the roof of a mouth. Then, in my own voice again, it whispered, "I see you." I don't know how long I sat there. I must have passed out from the sheer terror because the next thing I remember was a sliver of gray morning light cutting through the doorframe. I was shivering violently. I waited until the sun was fully up before I dared to touch the door. When I finally stepped outside, I looked up at the roof. The slate tiles were cracked, and there were deep, narrow grooves gouged into the stone walls of the hut, as if something with very long, very sharp claws had been trying to find a grip. I ran the whole way back to the village. I didn't stop until I hit the paved road where the tea stalls were opening up. I didn't tell anyone what happened, not really. I just said I got lost and stayed in the shepherd's hut. But the old men in the square looked at my face, then looked at the scratches on my gear, and they didn't ask any more questions. They just nodded and told me to stay out of the cedar grove for a while. I still work as a guide. I have to. But I don't go out past 4 o'clock anymore. And sometimes, when I'm at home at night and it's very quiet, I'll hear a voice from the backyard, right near the window. It'll sound like a friend or a neighbor, or even myself, calling out a name. I never look out the window. I just turn up the TV and wait for the sun to come up. Because I know that out there, in the dark, something is learning. It's practicing. It's waiting for the next time I'm alone in the trees, listening for a voice I think I know. Would you have opened that door? Tell me in the comments. I'll see you on the next night shift. Subscribe if you dare.